Hi everyone, happy Tuesday. My name's Hannah and I had the book Youre by CJ Pascoe and I absolutely loved it. It was amazing and that goes a long ways because I'm not much of a reader. This is one of the very few books I've read from front to back cover and I loved it. Again, it's Youre by CJ Pascoe and it talks about masculinity and sexuality in adolescence. This main focus is on a high school in California, which is called River High School. Um, the name has been changed, as well as all of the interviewees throughout Pascoe's book, and I think he did this for privacy, which I thought was really awesome. Pascoe touches base on masculinity and femininity. I can't really say that word, I apologize. Um, but mostly it's about masculinity in this high school and how boys prove their masculinity, how they avoid the label fag. That's probably, you're wondering why it's titled that way, of his book. And it goes into gender roles, sex talk, which is sex talk among boys and teenagers and even girls, but like I said, its main focus is on masculinity and boys. He does in-depth interviews with many students, popular kids, not so popular kids, heterosexual students, non-heterosexual. I'm not sure how to properly say this, so I'm really trying not to offend anyone. Um, and he also goes over gender and a few other components, but a lot of his main focus is how masculinity and sexuality are directly correlated and how the school is a primary place that provides activities to show for students to show their masculinity and sexuality, both men and women. Like assembly specifically was a really big one, but it was really good. And he interviewed many students, popular, not popular, like I said. And he also does these in various places like the mechanic shop, during school hours, after school hours, um, lunch time, just anywhere and everywhere, classroom observations. So it's pretty well in depth. And I found that this book tied very closely um, with a lot of the themes that we learned. Specifically in week 1, we learned of themes of masculinity. Sorry, I'm sick. I can't really talk. For one, anti-feminism. Anti-feminism basically states that to be masculine, you cannot have any ounce of feminine inside of you or show it. And I found that a lot in this book. For example, calling another student fag at River High was a terrible thing, and to be a fag, they threw that word around for no reason, but to those kids, that was something terrible. It took away their masculinity, it stripped them away of their manliness, and that was to be avoided at all costs. You could also be called a fag if you showed any traits of stuff that girls would do, or girls or women. So worrying about your clothes, how you look, etc. And that's where anti-feminism comes in. If you show any of that, you are unmasculine. So that's also where the word fag comes in. So those are tied really directly to each other. Also, sturdy oak. That theme was talking about how boys should not show anger. I mean, the only emotion they should show is anger, no emotions of intimacy or anything. And Pascoe notes that within groups, boys would talk about sex. They would talk about women as sexual objects. They wouldn't talk about intimacy or heartbreak or relationships like that, more or less, how they're going to score at the next dance, etc. However, Pascoe did find when he did individual one-on-one interviews with some of these students that they did in fact show intimacy and the want to be intimate, but in a group, they did not. They just talked about girls as sexual objects in their knowledge, which showed how they were masculine because they knew about sex, they had sex, etc. And so showing limited amount of emotions to me, and maybe it wasn't exactly anger, but to restrict your emotions to me, that fit in the category of sturdy oak. In addition to this, in week one, we also learned about how boys wear a mask and the consequences of this mask. And the book didn't necessarily go into consequences of um, wearing a mask, but it showed lots of examples of how boys are to wear those masks. For example, reverting back to the example I just gave of how boys would in private show their intimacy feelings towards women in relationships, but not in groups, that's wearing a mask. They are hiding their true feelings around peers and other people. Also, the word fag, again, to be called a fag was really detrimental to these kids. It took away their masculinity. So, in order to not be called a fag, you must present yourself a certain way. And although those kids kind of threw the word fag around like it was no big deal, sometimes it didn't really mean anything, but for the most time, it felt to a man, it felt like they were being stripped of their masculinity. To avoid this, they had to not be feminine. They had to show no qualities of being feminine, and that was a mask. That they had to put on a mask to avoid being labeled this word. Um, so it's ultimately a mask, and there's many of examples of wearing a mask.